But it wasn't too bad. And we didn't get to do any sightseeing in Paris in London, because the bombs were falling. Sometimes 3, 4, 5 a day, all night. We always had to be careful with the bombs hitting our building or the street. So we didn't get to do too much sightseeing, but one weekend, my roommate and I, we went to the USO. We looked on the bulletin board, and there was a tour to Windsor Castle. So we thought, there were about 7 of us on the bus. We were the only Americans, the others were from another country. So we took the bus to Windsor Castle, but the guard said, we won't be able to see much of the castle because the king is in. The flag was flying at half-staff. So we said, okay. We saw the carriages, the cemetery, the chapel, and then we went into a room maybe about this size, looking at paintings on the wall. And the door opened, and the king and queen and Margaret and Elizabeth walked in. Now, here's a little country girl. How do you greet a king? Do you stick your hand out? Do you genuflect? I had no idea, so I just said, I'm Helen Kogel. I'm an American, and I'm on General Eisenhower's staff in London. And the king said, oh, do you know Elizabeth? And I said, well, no, I don't. He said, she's going to be driving for your American officers at the embassy. And I looked at her and I said, I hope I see you around. Never dreaming I was looking at the next Queen of England. And the other tour that we took was to 10 Downing Street. This was on a Saturday afternoon, about 4 o'clock, just my roommate and I. We walked over, took the train over to 10 Downing. It was about 4 o'clock. The guard escorted us into the reception room, and the hostess said, would you girls like a cup of tea? Well, we were good tea drinkers by that time. So we had our cup of tea, and Winston Churchill walked in. Now, he picked up his cup of tea and his scone and walked out. But that night, I wrote to my mother, and I said, Mom, I had tea with Winston Churchill today. And all this time, we were still going through the buzz bombs. We were sleeping 3 stories underground by this time because our hotel had been hit. But it was the end of April. I had just finished the typing. Before I finish my speech today, I'll come back to this part of it because I'd like to tell you really what it was like to type that. It was probably this thick. I did 3 copies, and I typed from February to April. So the morning that they came in and told me the work was finished, would I like to go up the office to General Eisenhower's office? I said, yes. We walked up there, and they gave me the original copy to give to him. He looked at it. He said, do you know what you've typed? I said, yes, sir. These are your plans for the invasion. And then he said, do you know you have a brother over here? I said, no. He said, yes, you have a brother over here who's serving under General Patton in 3rd Armored Division in Salisbury, England. And then he handed me a pass. I hadn't seen Jerry in over 3 years. He left before I did. And he said, you're going to go down and spend the weekend in Salisbury and visit with your brother. Now, here's a man with thousands and thousands of men. He knew who I was, what I had typed, and he made it possible for me to go visit my brother. The only thing he said, I will tell you this, he won't be going over on the first wave because he's in the Armored Division. And he said they have to wait until the shore is taken before he'll go in. But I was able to go down and spend the weekend with him. And of course, then I kept up with him after he went across by coming into Paris. And then D-Day. You will have no idea of the feeling that I had that morning when they announced that today was D-Day. Here I had typed the plans, and I couldn't tell a soul what was happening other than those men who gave the gave it to me. It was a beautiful day. It was June 6th. I remember getting up real early to go to breakfast canteen, walked across the square, and I thought, what a beautiful day. But the only thing that bothered me was for 2 days before that, the planes were going across. And the night before we went to bed, we went to the underground and came back, the planes were still flying. And I thought to myself, boy, Germany is really getting a clobber with that many planes going over. And that morning, and then I realized that that was the beginning of D-Day. It was we sat in the office, none of us talked because there wasn't anything that we could possibly say. We all knew what was happening. And later on, I'll come and tell you how we realized that what I had typed was actually happening right there on the beach. So we went ahead and survived through that. It was nearly a month that we were waiting in London until the last of July. They decided that, well, the bombs were still falling, and this was because Montgomery was not getting the V2s. His agenda was to cross to Calais and put down the Germans who were sending those bombs over. And he wasn't able to do that, and it was holding us up. But that morning, they told us that we would be leaving that night to go across to France. So I went to the telegraph office across the street to send a telegram to my mother and dad to say, hold up my mail, I'm being moved. And a bomb hit that building. And I landed on the floor, covered in glass. And I was crying, and I was scared to death until somebody picked me up and said, you're not hurt, so you can quit crying. But I often tell this to the children, that yes, adults do cry when they're hurt. So we packed up, we went to Southampton, and here, us 30 girls boarded a big troop ship. We were the only ones on it. We almost crossed the channel when the ship stopped, and the commander said, all right, girls, this is where you depart. Well, it was midnight, no lights on the ship. I didn't see a gangplank, and I said, wait a minute, I don't swim. He said, no, there's a rope ladder going down the side of that ship. He said, you just turn around and you walk down that rope ladder, there'll be a landing craft waiting for you, take you to shore. So we did. None of us fell. We all made it, got in the landing craft, and he got almost to shore when he said, this is as far as I go, you walk the rest of the way. So we walked with water up to our hip to the shore, sat down, and waited until daylight, till a truck came up, picked us up, and took us up to the front line. We were on Utah Beach, and there was this several thousand Army men ready to go out. They were going through the chow line, so we just fell in line beside them and went through and got breakfast. But I said to the girl back of me, I wonder how long it'll take before we'll get our clothes so we can get out of these wet shoes and pants. And there was a young man back of me, and he said, I have a Jeep, I'll be glad to take you back there. Well, that's how I met my future husband. He was born and raised right here in College Park. He was working for Southern Bell and was with the telephone company. And he was with the Signal Corps that followed this particular army up to the front lines. And he would wait until the town was taken, and then they would check the lines, cell phone lines, make sure it goes back to the headquarters in Paris, and then they would go on. So we were able to, we stayed on Utah Beach though from July, 1st of July until the end of July, when Paris was taken. And then they flew us into Paris, but they were still fighting on the street, so we had to wait in the hotel 2 days until food was brought in. But that was an experience of being right there in the middle of war. The room that they assigned me to had a German uniform in it, an officer's uniform. Well, when I opened up the closet door to put my clothes in there and saw that, I said, boy, I better get this out of here fast because I don't want him to come back and get his uniform. So I called the manager of the hotel and he took it, but that's where we stayed, right in the middle of Paris for the first 6 or 8 months. We moved probably 3 times to different hotels before our time was up in Paris.